And it was interesting as well too when you're interviewing some of the women and trailblazers from those early days of the 70s and the 80s and that, and they made the comments as far as, they almost think it's worse now because if someone hated them back in the day, they would actually have to take the time and scratch out a letter and mail it and never see it again. Whereas at the type of a keyboard now, you can just spew the most vile things in the world. So do you find that we're maybe actually at arguably a worse place now than we were back 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're talking about. So, I think that they definitely had it worse. That whole group, Melissa Ledke, Christine Brennan, Leslie Visser, Claire Smith, being the first group into the locker rooms. And in Melissa's case, she had to sue to go into the locker room. She had to sue Major League Baseball. So that group, I mean, obviously they had it much harder face to face with the players. I think the athletes today are used to seeing women on TV. They know there's women in sports. Like it's not a shock to them to see women in the locker room like it was to them. So, there's these horrific stories, especially about guys like Jack Morris and, the way that they treated these women back when they first smashed through the glass ceiling. But on the other hand, yeah, you're right. I mean, they would say someone had to sit down, they had to write me a letter, they had to put it in the mailbox, put a stamp on it, use a stamp for it. Then it got to my job and my boss would take it first. And, maybe he would give it to me, maybe he wouldn't, or I could look at the outside and decide whether or not I was going to open it or not. And we don't really have that. We have, we are all sort of encouraged and in some cases required to be on social media. I know people will say, don't go into your mentions. I think that's really difficult to do on Twitter because then you're not engaging with anybody. You're just sort of doing drive-by postings and then you leave, which takes all the fun out of social media. So yeah, I mean, we do have to wade through a lot more garbage these days. And I was really surprised because I did expect that group of women, that generation to say, oh, quit whining, suck it up. We had to put up with so much worse. But I really think they have a handle on what the online harassment is like. And they feel for, the women going through it now.
Yeah. And, for the casual observer who might think like, okay, well, I don't see what the big deal is. This sports anchor got dragged online because of whatever last week there. Sort of put it in context, a male sports anchor might get dragged if, he says something stupid or has a particularly hot take that backfires or screws up on air or something. But just by even waking up on a Tuesday morning, you haven't even done anything and you're getting all these mentions and tags and all of that. Like, even pre-book release, like what is it even like? Like what's a typical week like for a woman working in the sports industry?
Yeah, I think it sort of depends. I mean, I think there definitely are women who manage to lessen it by sort of keeping their heads down, sticking to X's and O's and just sort of, going along to get along, right? Just, just kind of keep your head down. Don't draw attention to yourself. But, if you comment on anything that is sort of a hot button topic as it relates to sports, so we're talking about racism or sexism or online harassment or sexual assault, domestic violence, that is when you really feel it. That's when you really get targeted. So it's tough because, people will say, oh, come on, guys get it too. Well, but there's been plenty of studies that show that men get it much differently. So guys might get, oh my God, you're so stupid. I can't believe you have this job. Anybody could do this job better than you. They should, a monkey could do your job, that kind of stuff. Whereas women get much more gendered, sexualized, violent threats. So we get, I hope someone rapes you to death, or I'm going to come to Chicago and rape you with a hockey stick. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I don't think your skin is ever thick enough to deal with. And, I've had so many like older men say to me like, oh, kid, you got to get a thick skin. And it's like, okay, well, when someone is talking about how they want to rape your children, then get back to me. But there is a segment, a very vocal segment of society that really does not believe that women belong in this space. And their way of trying to silence people and shut us up and maybe push us out of the space is to just engage in this constant harassment. I mean, I've got a group of guys that is growing, sadly, that have been after me since 2015 when I wrote about Patrick Kane's sexual assault case. I mean, we're going on 6 years that I'm basically their hobby, and they spend a ton of time talking, they're online all day talking about me. And like my husband will say, like, I'm married to you and I don't think about you as much as these guys do. Like it's really, disturbing. And I had, Christine Ledlow in the book, who was with NBA TV, talks about, being stalked and, not knowing what city this guy is in, and he's making all these different accounts. And the thing that makes it really difficult is that we're sort of twisting in the wind. Like outside of ESPN, I don't know how many of us really get support from our employers. So it's sort of like they want you on social media, but then when this happens to you, it's sort of somehow, well, it's your fault, or it's your social media account, or that really has nothing to do with us. And, and they just sort of want you to, handle it yourself, which I think is not going to work going forward.
Yeah.